So I'm in my Drive. I just usually go to drive.google.com and then I go through and I say new, whatever I want to make, right? So I made a Google Doc. With Google Docs, if you haven't used it before, it's automatically saving. So you don't have to save things. I like to rename my title. So I'm just going to go ahead and type a paragraph that I'll use for the next set of demonstrations here. All right, so let's say I have this sentence. There's a few different things I can do with this sentence, all within Google Documents. If I wanted to, I could take and I could highlight this, and if I wanted to make a comment on that, if it's my document or somebody else's, I can make a comment, which is kind of nice because then people can go through and actually reply to your comment. So this is really great if you're doing some sort of document together. You don't really want somebody to kind of rewrite your text, which is possible in Google Docs, but you want them to make comments. So you can make a comment and then they can reply to it, and then eventually you can actually resolve that comment, right? Also, within Google Docs, you can go through and you can say translate. Any document you want, just like that. Okay, or if I right click on this, I can also do some things. Let's see, let's highlight Halloween. Say what is Halloween exactly, right? And it'll go and just straight from the document has a nice little dictionary for me. Okay. And if I want to close that tab, I'm not sure why my browser is looking funny. Okay. Also from here, I can go through and there's a word count, a very kind of rudimentary word count here. I can research. Okay, they used to call it research, now it's explore, but I'm exploring what is Halloween. So straight from here, I can go through and I can actually find and insert, images. This is great for students to go through and kind of create interactive documents easily. One thing I can also do, if you haven't tried it before, this obviously wouldn't be great for a classroom setting, but if maybe it's just for yourself, you can talk to your computer just like you would your phone, I suppose, and it'll type for you, period. And it actually does a very good job. Okay, that's funny because I said it does a good job and then it said it isn't a very good job. So it's a work in progress, I suppose. Also, as you may or may not know, in Google Documents, whenever people are editing a document together, there's a few different tools that you can use, and this is great for using with students collaboratively. You can see a revision history, where you can see at different times what different things were. And so you can go back and you can actually restore those revisions. And there's actually even a detailed revisions, which for this document it's not very much, but you can imagine for some documents it's quite a bit. So I like to use that with students because in a group project, for example, it would highlight the text of all the students that were working on a document. And so you really can't go through and say that Johnny did all the work because, hey, there's 3 other classmates that contributed as well. It's just that Johnny maybe, deleted what they wrote and wrote something that he wanted to write, You can also, if you teach elementary and middle school and even high school too, right? They might write notes to each other back and forth and you can see those notes. So in my own teaching experience, that was sometimes interesting when the boys were talking about who likes who and whatever, right, on these documents, thinking they wouldn't get caught, and of course they did. There's also a mode here, which I usually use in group projects. There's a suggest mode, so I can go through and I can say, just I'm selecting right over it, but that way you can kind of see the revisions, and then you would just say like, oh yeah, that's a good suggestion. I can accept that. There's different things you can do too for Google Docs. When I say insert image, You can upload an image, but you can also search straight from the web. So again, if I just do like Halloween, it's going to show me all of the Creative Commons licenses that are commercial reuse with modification. So it's basically someone says, yeah, you can use these images even if you're going to sell it, essentially, and you can modify them too. So that's terrific. Straight from within the document, I can do that. I can also go through, and then of course to resize the image, I would just kind of drag it down here, right? Also from within Google Docs, I can insert charts, right? I can do columns, and so in this case, I would edit the kind of original sheet, here, but I can definitely just insert the chart straight there. And so think about how your students could be, kind of doing a little bit of almost graphic design, but all from within Google Docs. There's an equation editor. There's, you can insert links, of course, which we want to kind of encourage students to make these dynamic deals. Also, there's kind of some neat things where, let's say I want to insert extra things. Google Docs has add-ons. So I would say like get add-ons, and there's one that I use where I can insert like educational videos that are already curated directly from the web. So if I'm looking for like a video, I'm doing a lesson plan, or I'm finding something for my students and I want to find something about fractions, so it's called the lesson plan tool for Docs. Okay, I can insert like a game, fraction game, and it'll take me straight to it. So kind of cool. So there's a lot of different possibilities for Google Documents that you can have for your students do, class projects and whatever. Let me just show you briefly also about Google Earth. And don't think that just because you, do I not have it installed? That's fantastic. Just because you don't teach history or geography or something, that you can't use Google Earth. I'll even just use Google Maps, although Google Earth is much more interesting, and I'll do that in just a minute. So here I am. This is actually where I live now. I grew up in Fresno pretty much, or Visalia actually. Lived in Fresno for like 15, 16 years actually, I guess. And moved about a year and a half ago to go work for an education technology company called OpenEd.com, which our offices are right around here in downtown Los Gatos, just down the street from Netflix, like the actual Netflix. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at Netflix. I'm just dragging in my little person, and here's Netflix. They have some quite nice offices. So I think it's a great idea for students to even just use this Google Maps to kind of, go different places and explore different parts of the world they may not have been to. Obviously, maybe not Netflix, but maybe something like, the White House. And they can go and they can actually kind of see like, hey, what does it look like, right? So let's go over here. I can look all around. Obviously that was in front of the wrong building there. Okay, so kids can kind of experience living, going somewhere else, even if it's Google Maps, right? To get Google Earth, what you can do is, obviously download it here, which this is a newer computer, so I don't have it yet. But essentially you can take kids on virtual trips, right? And I'm using the Screencast program, Screencast-O-Matic, to do this narration tour, and you could do the same thing with Google Earth, which is pretty cool. So I've seen great examples of things, like if you're a 4th grade teacher and you're doing the California missions, we'll go and have the kids walk around the California mission and have them record like a narrated story or something, or have them write a fiction about going to the Egyptian pyramids, right? And they can use actual like images from around the Egyptian pyramids as they're telling their story. All kinds of different interesting things you can do. Even when I taught math, oftentimes I would take my kids to where Pythagoras was learning about the Pythagorean on the island of Samos, and you can kind of make these connections that otherwise wouldn't be present to them, just using technology, and it's kind of a nice way to kind of help them kind of see more what's going on. Also, you can, in Google Drive here, another way to use Google Suite with your students is to make a Google form. So you go down here to the new, this is in Google Drive, go new Google Forms, and you can make a Google form to learn about information. So you can just say, like, if you're doing math or science or even social studies or English or any subject really, have them take a survey. Right, and then all the responses will get grouped together, and it's a really easy way to kind of see different responses. Let me see if I can find a random form. This is a form I was actually, if you guys know Chris Brownell and Steve Pauls over at Fresno Pacific, this is actually something I was working with them last week to help do. And so just shows different responses that you would get, and it makes a graph automatically, and it shows all the answers nice and organized, right? And it actually creates a separate form as well. And what I used to do sometimes is you can actually, for example, here's the actual form data, right? So I can now take this form data, and if I wanted to, and I say, hey, I want to find the average, right, of all this information, I can actually go through and I can just do something like average okay, and it would find the average for me automatically. So I would use Google Forms quite a bit when I was kind of trying to ascertain class data or to find out kind of what students were thinking on a certain topic. There's a million other assessment tools you can use, right? But I found it was a really good kind of pre-assessment tool. So there's just a whole bunch of things you can do. So there, it finally found the average. So this week, what I'd like you guys to do for Education 644 is simply go through and show me different ways that you can use Google to create like a lesson element. So maybe your lesson element is simply you're going to say, hey, I'm going to have students use Google Docs to write a story together. That's fine. That's great. Let's start somewhere, right? Maybe you're going to make a Google form to do a pre-test and post-test with your students. Maybe you're going to have your students make a Google form for one another to make a more effective presentation. Maybe you'll have your students go to Google Maps and find information. So my goal here is I don't need you to make a whole separate lesson plan. I just like you to go through and take a lesson you're already going to do and think about how you could enhance it with one of the tools you've seen on this video tonight.